Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Quincy on Quinsippi Island, where the Friends of the Log Cabins continue to work on this log cabin village down here. We've been here several times, but it keeps changing, and that's why we keep coming back. The focus of today's program is the Fraser Cabin. The Fraser Cabin was the first log cabin built in Adams County. They moved it down here years ago, and now it's deteriorated and it's time to redo the Fraser Cabin. And John Gephardt, I say it keeps changing. You and your friends have been down here for, 10 years anyway.
At least, yeah.
And we keep seeing the deterioration due to the weather, of course.
Right.
And you also have brought in some people who are very knowledgeable about rehabilitating these cabins, and you want to get them all to where they're stable and can just be in good repair for years and years and years. And that's the point, isn't it?
Right, that's the point. These things go back to the 1800s. We want them to last at least double that time, if longer, and then another group will probably have to step in and do the same thing, because roofs are only good for so long and then they have to be replaced.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing first. First thing we did when we came here at about 2006 was replace all the roofs. Some of them we put cedar shake roofs on because the building was strong enough that it could handle it. Others we put metal. Others we said it's too far gone, let's not waste money on it, and we will take it apart and store it and then rebuild it. And that's what we're doing with the Fraser Cabin today.
Yeah, we're going to look at that real soon, but if we look over behind us over here, when I was here last time, this is what you were doing. You were rebuilding the Clad Adams cabin. And it looks like you had a successful outcome, because it looks like it's good and stable now.
Yeah, it's good and stable. It's got a new roof. It's been rechinked and redaubed, and it's got new doors on it. In fact, we're using it for a classroom for this workshop today, for this week.
You had, this is interesting, there's a renewed interest in log cabins. You had people come in from out of state here to learn from Mr. Gallagher. I think he's from Iowa.
Right. No, he's from Idaho.
Idaho, okay. To learn how to rehabilitate these cabins.
Right.
There's a lot of renewed interest, because people all over the Midwest, and I guess all over the country, they're finding these cabins in storage, aren't they? And they don't know how to put them back together.
Yeah. A lot of times they were taken apart. Sometimes they didn't bother to label them or anything, and so they've got a mess that they got to figure out how to put it back together. Yeah. And Mr. Gallagher is good. We got involved in Mr. Gallagher because he shows you how to take it apart correctly so that it's easier to put back together again. And that's what we did with the Clad Adams cabin.
Yeah. Kind of like a puzzle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's very important that the puzzle goes back together the same way. Otherwise, you have mismatch, and all of a sudden you've got a place where you don't have a log.
Now, we want the Fraser cabin to look like the Clad Adams cabin, so let's walk up to the Fraser cabin and take a look. Now, it looks like a total wreck now, but you guys were actually very careful in the way you took this down, weren't you?
Right. We're doing one log at a time. We started off with taking the roof off, and the roof was not salvageable, so it's sitting over in the dumpster.
Okay, so the roof got thrown away.
Yes.
Okay, that you'll have to start from scratch. But I can see already what you've done here is you've got every log numbered, huh?
Yeah. What you do is you number it by the what perspective it's like, and this is the east side, and we're facing west, but my back is to the east. And basically what we're looking at is the number, each log gets numbered, and if you've got two logs on the same thing, you've got a left and a right and a window in the middle. And so it all has to be numbered so that when you go to put it back together, you know exactly where things go.
Yeah. Okay, now, you've also got a foundation issue too, because every one of these has to have a good foundation, or it's just going to sink, right?
Right. Well, and the thing about it is we're sitting in a little bit of a floodplain, so we've got to raise them up. So we're trying to raise them up above the 100-year floodplain, and that's what the Clad Adams is sitting above, is the 100-year floodplain. Okay. This one will be raised the same exact way, so it's above the floodplain. Plus, we're putting things under it to keep the critters out. The biggest problem is if you just sit them on the ground, groundhogs, woodchucks, etc., get underneath. And
will you pour concrete? Will that have a concrete foundation?
No, we'll have rock.
Rock. Okay, the way it would have been done properly if the original builder had enough rock to do it. Huh?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, we use We use foundations in the corner to hold up the sill log, but in the middle it's rock. And then we set the floor back on top of that.
Very interesting.
And that way we keep the critters from getting under there. There's nothing, you know, they don't
Yeah.
like digging in rock.
Yeah.
And I even had a skunk under here one time.
That doesn't surprise me.
Lucky he decided to go before we had any events.
Now that one over there, is that one nearly finished? Is that one pretty good?
That's pretty
to your
stable.
satisfaction?
Yeah, that's
okay.
that's a Hurleman cabin.
Hurleman, okay.
And we started on it first, got it stabilized. We did replace the bottom sill log on the left, and then we obviously put a cedar shake roof on it to protect it. So it's stable. It's going to be good for a while until we get to it. And that's what we're trying to do, is do them one by one as they need.
Well, I mean, and money's not unlimited. I mean,
No.
it takes money to do these. I think you told me that just for the cedar shingles, it could be up to $5,000 for single.
$5,500 for the corn crib.
Well, let's take a look at that as long as we're here. We're going to spend a little more time on the corn crib because it's a unique structure.
Right.
But you can see what you've got on there now is a metal roof.
Right.
And that's not your goal, is it?
No. We want to go back to the cedar shake roofs that would have been in the 1800s. They did, and so we put the metal on just to protect the wood, stabilize it, keep it current, and then, like I say, we'll eventually replace that with cedar shakes.
Yeah.
And this goes back to 1854. It's one of the most unique structures because most corn cribs never survive. A lot of times they just got bulldozed. And it's really neat because on the left side, what we have is that's where they would have had any kind of livestock or anything, and on the right side is where they would have stored the corn.
Yeah. So it was more than a corn crib; it was a barn too,
Right.
wasn't
It was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Because you can tell that because you can see where the doors open on the right inside that open area there, and that's where they shoveled the corn in. And if you look on the inside on the right, you'll see there's little slats that keep the corn from rolling out at the bottom.
Okay.
And so it's kind of neat to see a structure like this because, you know, they had a lot of ingenuity back in those days, and they had to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
We have an Eagle Scout project where we're actually having them restore that log corn wagon.
Okay.
That's what they would have used, and I still remember the days when we just had a small stand of corn that we'd each get on each side of the corn wagon and chuck the corn off the stalk and throw it in the corn wagon. Then we would bring it to a corn crib for storage for the winter. And one of our Eagle Scouts is going to restore that frame so that at least we can push it in and push it out.
Oh, that'll be great. That'll be great. And he's got his work cut out for him.
Yeah.
I hope he can move that thing without. It looks like it's frozen up. I hope he
No,
can.
it actually rolls. It
Does it?
still rolls.
Now, and right behind us over here, this is the church. We're not going to go up to it, but you're satisfied with the condition of the church too. You've got it stabilized.
For the night, for the time being,
For the
yeah.
time being.
Eventually, it'll need some attention, just like all the rest.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process. I mean, but once we get them pretty stabilized, they'll last for a long time.
Yeah.
But that one needs a cedar shake roof, but before we do that, we want to make sure we got a good foundation.
Yeah.
So you always want to make sure you start with a good foundation, then you add the cedar shake roof as the last thing.
Okay. Well, thank you. You mentioned Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Here from Idaho, and he's been here before. He's an expert at reconstruction of these.
Right.
And we're going to talk to him a little bit. I really am very interested, now that the Clad Adams cabin is finished and the Fraser cabin's underway, what his thoughts are about how to go through that process.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Gallagher, the week started, I think, on Saturday when they took the roof off the Fraser cabin.
Yeah.
Which is, you'd always want to start at the top, right, and get that off there. And I guess they just had to throw it in the dumpster. It was a complete wreck.
It was an adios. That's the best you
Yeah.
can say about it.
Yeah.
And so we came here, and there were not quite 4 walls. We have one wall that fell over, and we're working on
Really?
that.
Was it
And then
this wall here?
No, it was the one that's
That
plywood.
one fell over?
Yeah.
Oh man.
So this was all braced and held together, and we've disassembled it, and it has not much going for it right now. But we're going to try to put it back together over time, so it looks like the Clad Adams building. But
Yeah.
right now, it's scary. It's kind of messy.
So far, I'm looking at these individual logs. What percentage of those have you been able to save, or even care about trying to save? Are they just too rotten, or what happens?
We're losing about 2 out of 8.
Well, that's not as bad as I thought. Maybe.
No.
You know? Yeah.
Now, you have to remember, the logs have historic value in and of themselves. They're old logs. So you might put one of those back in a building that you might, if you were building a new home, you might say adios. But you're going to say, 1850. Well, I'd rather put my hand on real history than make-believe history. And an 1850 log, even if it's got some decay, you're going to want to keep. And that's what we're doing. We're making that judgment over there.
So there is a way, I mean, you assess each one, and there is a way to preserve, if you decide that they're keepable, there's a way to preserve them and reuse them. And you'll show us that process later on.
We will,
okay.
for sure.
Okay, good deal. Now, right now we're looking at the flooring, and it looks like every piece of floorboard is also numbered and identified.
Right, and the whole idea here is that we'd like to put the building back the way it came apart. So all the logs are numbered, all the floors numbered, and that doesn't mean that everything has to absolutely go back there. We may take a long log that has 6 feet of salvageable material in it and save those 6 feet, put the rest in a dumpster, and then reuse that 6 feet of 1850 log in a small area in the building rather than substitute new material. So we're going to try to be conservative.
Yeah. How do you store this stuff? For instance, this is probably going to have to be in storage for a year until they can get the money together to put it back together. Well, how do you store it?
Well, the first thing we did was clean them. After we took the building apart, we had to clean them. Scrape them out with an awl, put compressed air on them, blow everything out, and then we put a insecticide, mildicide, and fungicide in it. It's called Boracare. And it's not too different than borax.
You'll show us that process,
you'll
right?
see that, and the product itself is non-toxic to you or me or your animals or plants. But if you were a termite, you'd be in big trouble.
Well, that's what we want.
There you go.
That's what we want.
So that will help store these buildings. That'll last a few years. And by that time, we hope there's some money together to put this back together.
Where do you put them? Just anywhere that's dry?
Ideally.
Okay, and the temperature doesn't have to be in a very narrow range or anything?
We're not going to be able to control that very well.
Yeah, okay, just store them where it's dry and then go get them when you're ready to use them?
That's right.
Okay, all right. I noticed this foundation, it looks like somebody attempted to put, is that concrete or is that just stone block? I don't know what that is, stones or what is that?
No, that's concrete. And I don't know who put this together. There's a sort of, they shouldn't have done it this way quality to what you see. You know, you can't hold the past against itself because at least the logs are here.
They were doing their best, right? They did what they thought was best, even though that's not the way you'd do it.
Well,
can we walk over there?
Yes, let's do that.
Because this was quite an achievement.
This was a pile of sticks.
A pile of sticks, and this is what you're going for, right? You want that to be as stable as this.
That's correct. So, the first time I saw this, the logs, it was January, the logs were in a shed not too far from here. It had been raining on it. It was under 30 degrees. Everything was frozen together, and I was trying to make some decisions about what logs to keep and what logs not to keep. Well, that didn't work out so good, so I came back a month or two later, looked at the logs, and I said, why don't you get me 4 or 5 logs, and I'll put this building back together, and then I'll put a roof on it. And then the volunteers, after I had built this log crib, came in and they did the chinking and the daubing, and I had put up, you know, a new roof, and they did the shakes on top of that, put the fascia board on and everything. So this has been a combination of efforts. It's been professionals doing work and the volunteers doing work. None of it's free.
Oh no, it must be interesting for you. You could go almost anywhere in the country and probably go to a state where you've helped put a log cabin back together. That's kind of neat. That's kinda neat,
my wife and I are talking about a busman's holiday where we just go around and look at the buildings that I've done, and she said, "You've worked where?" And I said, "Yeah, we've worked there."
Just about everywhere.
Pretty much.
And here's what I've noticed since I've been doing this program. people call me for information about log cabins because they know that I've done a few programs on it. I've noticed that there's a resurgence of interest because people are finding these old logs stored and they don't know what to do with them.
I know. Sometimes they just do whatever they think they can. That may or may not produce the results they want. Sometimes they call me and I can help them with a few photographs. I can talk to them.
Yeah.
It's best if I can go lay hands on. You wouldn't call up a doctor and say, hey, listen, I think my blood pressure is high. What should I do? Well, that's kind of what happens with cabins. You know, if I can go and actually see the patient, I can fix it.
Yeah. Well, in a little bit, I'd like you to take us over and show us how they're treating, first how you assess whether a log's keepable, and then what you do to treat it. But in the meantime, we're talking to some of the folks that came here for this workshop this week. And you know, they have different backgrounds and they're here for different reasons. It's interesting to see why they're here.
I have a personal interest in helping little historical societies and nonprofits drive down their long-term maintenance costs. So the roofs on these buildings have special applications of galvanized metal. They're not full of moss or fungus anymore. We're going to be using a product over here that is a fungicide, a mildicide, that helps buildings store for a long time. If they didn't have that, they'd be full of bugs.
Yeah.
Powder post beetles and the like. We're also looking at certain kinds of treatments for staining of these logs if we need to, cheaply, so that you don't have to constantly do it. We want to do that, and now I've just learned about some special types of paints that, you know, you only have to apply them every decade or so, rather than what you're buying at the home store where you have to scrape it off and put it on, and scrape it off and put it on, and scrape it off. You know that drill.
Yeah, and all these, like you say, these small societies, they're all broke. I mean, they're doing their best, and it's their own money and their volunteers' money. You know, and so anything you can do to help them afford to preserve these things, that's a whopper of a deal.
It's a big deal. If you can look at that building and you can't see where the galvanized metal is over there, but I can walk you over to it, show it to you, and what happens is the zinc ions in the galvanized metal leaches out in the rain, dribbles down over the shakes, and kills the moss and fungus.
Wow, that's ingenious.
That roof now will last 40 years instead of 20 years.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you go back to work and I'll catch up with you later.
Okay, sounds great.
Thanks, Joe.
All righty.
Can I interrupt you for just a moment, Matthew? You're here for a class this week. It's like a workshop, right?
It is, yeah.
It's a hands-on, I guess, log cabin preservation workshop?
Preservation, restoration workshop,
And how do you happen to be interested in that?
Well, you know, I'm from Lincoln Log Cabin State Historic Site over in Lerna, Illinois.
Yeah.
And so we've got a number of log buildings that we're responsible for maintaining and caring for. And so we've got particularly a couple of buildings that we need to do some work on this summer. And so it really was fortuitous that they had the workshop this spring. So it's a little crash course before we do some work on our own.
You might even be in the situation where you might have to take one apart.
Right.
And this is helping you understand how you would take it apart and
Absolutely.
store it.
How to take it apart, mark it so that you know which pieces go where, whether it's going into storage or whether we're going to put it back together again. You still need to know which piece comes from which place in the cabin. So,
So what do you do? What is this?
This is one of the windows that we took out of the cabin here behind us. It was on the east side, and so I've marked it for the east front window, the right hand window. So.
And how many log buildings do you have over there at Lerna?
We've got 11.
11.
11.
So a real village. I mean,
Well,
twice this.
two historic farmsteads,
Yeah.
and between the two, we've got 11 log structures. So yeah.
And it takes constant maintenance, doesn't it?
It does. It does indeed.
You can imagine if your own modern house, how much that takes. I imagine a log house takes even more because it's been subjected over all these years. The elements,
So all the elements,
the weather, all the time.
Right. So quite a bit of work, and but something that's important to get a handle on so we can preserve for the long term.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to do this before, where you actually take one apart and store it?
No, I have not.
That's a new deal.
So this is new information for me.
Yeah, and the time may come when you may want to rebuild one of those over there. I don't know. Are they in pretty good shape?
For the most part, we've got some issues that we need to address on one particular building this summer, and it's going to involve replacing a log halfway down the gable wall. So we were really talking about that in the workshop this morning. So that information is going to come in handy.
So it's not always the foundation and the roof. It seems like it's always the foundation and the roof, but sometimes it's a wall.
Sometimes
a log in the middle.
sometimes it's something right in the middle of the building.
Yeah.
And you've still got to address it.
So you're here for a week. Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Well, I don't want to take you away from your work, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to us. Good luck. Hey, Joe, we're looking at a lot of logs. They've passed the test. Most of those over there, they're good, right? You're going to save those.
We're gonna reuse them. We'll put them back in the building. They're labeled. They'll go back where the labels say they came from. Each of these buildings we want to examine before we decide to keep it or throw it away. And we want to clean them. You know, they've accumulated a lot of dirt and debris over the years.
Yeah.
We scrape them out with an awl or a rat tail file, and then we blow them out with compressed air. And then, as you can see, these other fellas, they're putting on Boracare, which is a mildicide, fungicide, and pesticide. That's good no matter what happens to the log, and if it sits in storage for a year or two, it will help that log withstand the kinds of assaults that will happen from bugs and fungus and mildew. So what we're doing now is preparing for storage, making assessments and preparing for storage.
And some of these will get cut up, and some of them will, part of them will be saved, and some of the whole log will be saved, and some of them you just throw them away, right?
Yeah, there's a dumpster over here that's full of the adioses.
Old logs.
Yeah, they're
unsavable, right?
important, but they have no more structural integrity, so they have to go.
Well, Steve Niemeyer, you work for the Missouri, is it the Department of Natural Resources?
Yes.
And they have the first state capitol in St. Charles, Missouri,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And you're on the maintenance crew there.
Yes.
And it just so happens, not only do they have the old state capitol, but they got another old building that happens to be log on that property, huh?
Yes.
What's it called?
It's the dog trot style.
Uh-huh.
And it's in need of some repair, and it's not bad. However, this class was offered to me, and I got the opportunity to come up here and work with Joe to see what I can do to preserve our building.
You know what'll be interesting for you is after having been through this, going back there, you'll take a look at that dog trot building a little differently than if you hadn't been here.
Definitely.
You'll look at it and say, you know, it needs this, or you know what, that might just have to be taken apart.
Right, exactly.
And you'll know how to do it anyway,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Did you ever think that there was so much about log cabins? I mean, there's a lot of specific stuff to learn, isn't there?
Oh, yes, there is. So much. I have absorbed so much at this point, this early in the stage. This is only our third day here, and I'm trying to absorb as much as I possibly can to be able to take back to that property and preserve this. We have so many people that visit our property, and they walk there and they look at this building, and I want them to see what it was all about.
Well, I hope for your sake, when you get back there and take a good critical look at it, that it's in better condition than you think it is
Yes.
from what you learned here today.
Right.
That'd be nice, wouldn't
Yes,
it?
and I think it is already, because I'm remembering, you know, everything that I brought in that I wanted to look for, and it seems like it may not be as major as, you know, we had anticipated.
Yeah. Well, good. Thanks for talking to us.
You
Good
bet.
luck.
Thank you.
Well, Joe, some of the classroom stuff here has not been all hands-on. Some of it's actually instructional, right? And
That's right.
You brought a slide lecture with you. You've put this together over the years, I guess.
Yes. These are 10 or 11 discussions that I have with the students regarding specifics that they need to understand before they can walk out of here and say, I took Gallagher's class. So now we're going to go through this disassembly and assembly of a building. We talk about what you need for preparation. We talk about photographs, labels, witness marks, which are little inscriptions on the logs to find them later on. We talk about how to take a roof apart, how to lay out a building, show where the labels go on buildings, how to put the logs together, hew them, adds them, hew them, and it's
Yeah,
a lot of this is in the wilderness, so there's no mechanical anything.
They're learning not only about how to take one apart and put it together, but how it was actually constructed in the first place.
That's right.
That's what you need to.
We've talked about the different ways of hewing logs.
Yeah.
We talk about how to lay out a building, you know, how to get it square and level so that you can bring it up and have it actually function in the future. You can't just have a cockeyed structure.
Yeah.
So you can see in these slides that we build the roofs separately, because when you're up 25 feet in the air, you don't have time to figure out whether or not a log works or fits or whatever. So
Yeah, you want to know when you get up there you got the right piece.
bingo.
Okay.
And that it fits, and you know where it is. So there'll be little marks on the building and on the logs and on the purlins about where those logs are going to go. You know, and in a mechanical situation that we have in a wilderness where you can't use power equipment, you can't use wheels, it's all strength of back and arms. And so here we have, you know, just a gigantic roof, and here we are putting those roofs on a building. This is in the wilderness, so it's all done with shoulders and arms and backs.
Well, really, really important stuff to know. Well, thank you for showing us a little
My
bit about
pleasure.
your class. Gives hopefully by this time next year, the Fraser cabin, which of course is in pieces and being worked on now, will be beginning to be put back together again as a part of this, which gives a whole new meaning to the one-room schoolhouse. With another Illinois story on Quinsippi Island in Quincy, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.